Hey guys, today what we're going to do is we're going to be talking about respiration. And when you hear that word respiration, oftentimes you think of breathing in or inhaling and exhaling. But what we're going to be really talking about today is not so much the taking in of oxygen and letting off of carbon dioxide, but what happens at the cell level. And so we're going to be focusing on one particular aspect, which is called cellular respiration. Now, in order for us to really understand this concept, we need to do a little bit of review. So, what is an organelle that breaks down food or sugar into energy? I want you to pause for a second and see if you can recall that information. If you said the mitochondria, you're correct. The mitochondria is where this process happens, where cellular respiration occurs. And so we're going to be going down into this mitochondria for us to help us understand this concept. Now, one of the things I do want to make sure we understand is that when you start to understand and learn a little bit about cellular respiration, it's going to look very familiar. It's actually just the opposite of photosynthesis. Remember, we learned that photosynthesis is when you take carbon dioxide and water with a little bit of sunlight, and it makes glucose or sugar and oxygen. Well, cellular respiration is just the opposite of that. It's when we take the glucose or the sugar, the food that we take in, and it uses oxygen to break that apart so that we can have energy to be able to do our normal daily functions, and then has carbon dioxide and water as a byproduct. So this should look very familiar, and it's one of those things I want to make sure we understand. We're really just going ahead and talking about photosynthesis in the opposite direction, but I want to make sure we definitely understand why. It's really important for us to understand cellular respiration because that's where we get all of our food and our energy from. If we didn't have plants that get their energy from the sunlight, we wouldn't have our own energy ourselves. We get our energy from plants, consuming plants like vegetables or fruits. We have to thank the plants for giving us our energy. And it comes in the form of glucose. And then our body breaks that down. Cellular respiration. What really happens is our cells bring in sugar into the mitochondria and also brings in oxygen into the mitochondria. And what happens is this oxygen breaks apart your sugar or glucose so that it becomes and turns into a usable form of energy that our cells can actually use to be able to do the things we want to do. But in order for us to have that energy, then there's usually a byproduct, which is carbon dioxide and water. Now, this is a lot thrown at you, but we're going to be, again, looking at this chemical formula to help us understand this in more of a linear fashion. So again, here's our chemical formula. Remember, everything on one side of the reaction is called the reactants, and everything on the other side of the reaction is called the products. So in this case, for cellular respiration, our reactants are glucose or sugar and oxygen, and when those combine, energy is released, and it's energy it's usable by our cells. And as a byproduct or an additional products of the reaction, we have carbon dioxide, which we eventually then exhale, and we have water, which we eventually eliminate. That is cellular respiration. And if you look at it, it should look very familiar. It looks just like photosynthesis in the opposite direction. Now, one of the things I want to make sure we start to get that concept is that photosynthesis and cellular respiration are very connected together. So here I have an image for you. What I'd like you to do is I'd like you to take a look at this image to see if you can explain the connection between photosynthesis and cellular respiration based on what you see in this image. Now, if you said the tree in that little backpack is creating oxygen as a byproduct, it takes in carbon dioxide from our mouth and uses that for photosynthesis, and as a byproduct releases oxygen that when we use for cellular respiration, you're correct. We heavily depend on plants for two reasons. One, to get the oxygen that we need for cellular respiration so that we can then break down the glucose to get our energy. But we also need plants for that basic nutrient glucose or sugar. If we didn't have either of those, sugar or oxygen, we wouldn't be able to live. So plants are extremely important. Again, making sure that we see that connection between photosynthesis and cellular respiration. This image is trying to help us understand where our energy or our carbon, glucose, comes from. We get it from the plants, which then really gets their energy from the sun. So it's extremely important to see that this is a very interconnected network. We rely heavily on plants. The one thing I didn't stress today, what I want to stress right now, is that if you take a look at this image, you can see that what we call autotrophs, or organisms that make their own food, they do synthesis. But I want to make sure we understand both heterotrophs, which are organisms that eat or consume their food, do cellular respiration, but so do autotrophs or plants. This is extremely important for us to understand because, yes, plants make their food, but then they have to use it to be able to get energy that their cells can then use to do their normal daily function. So both plants and animals go through cellular respiration, but it's only autotrophs or things like plants that actually do photosynthesis. Make sure you have this stuff in your notes. We're going to be getting ready to do a lab on cellular respiration so that we can start to understand this concept and so we have evidence that it actually happens. I'll see you in class. Bye.